first part of this series, we saw the 72 by 86 quilt with an eagle that remains unpainted. This lesson will show you how we're going to paint that.
Okay, so this is the big day. We're going to finally start to paint our eagle on the quilt. The quilt will be then done. You'll notice I first have a drop cloth, or maybe you can't see, but it kind of glistens. So I think you might be able to see this, but I just have a piece of plastic wrap down on the quilt. So I have a place to put my paint palette without worrying about it dripping onto my quilt. Now, as far as my paint palette goes, it's very expensive, and it is a styrofoam plate. This is the way I have my paints arranged on my plate, and you can see I've already started blending some of them because I was doing some practicing earlier on. Now, the one thing I did discover on my original sample, these were the wings that I had done, and I wasn't real happy with the blending on there. So I found that by using an extender and putting that on the fabric first, you now get a much easier and smoother blend. So that's the first thing that we're going to do, is put the extender on. The brushes that I use vary in size. I've got one soaking here in its little bath, which again is a very expensive Dixie cup. The only thing that I don't cheap out on is my brushes. I like to use good quality brushes so that I don't have to worry about the hairs coming out in my paint. This is the biggest brush that I use, and it's about a 1/2 inch in diameter. And then I use a 1/4 inch brush. And then for those fine spaces, I use a narrow brush. So, with that being said, let's get started. We're going to put the extender on first. It's a little hard to tell the difference between the extender and the white paint, except it's a little bit on a gray side compared to the white paint. So that's how we can tell the difference. And we're not going to do the entire wing. We're only going to do part of it. And then we'll go back and do some more. So let's turn this around so we can get to the extender. Saturate our brush. The nice thing about the extender is it dries clear. So if you're going to have an oops outside the lines, this is the time to do it. And that's the only reason that I'm using a big brush right now. When I do the rest of the painting, you'll see that I switch to a smaller brush. In fact, I'm about ready to do that now because we're getting down into these small areas of the wing. So let's get rid of this one and switch over to this one. Now I'm going to moisten the sponge just a little bit just to get the bristles pliable. But as you can see, I'm drying the moisture off. So the first thing we're going to do is get a little bit of brown. And here we go. Because the extender's on there, if I didn't have that on there, this brown would be very, very, very dark. And we do want the edges dark because that's what would be in the shadows as the light would be hitting the bird's wing. All the areas around the wing would be darker. So that's what we're going for. However, in the center of the wing, now we bring in the light. And we're just going to kind of blend those in together so there's not a line of demarcation as we're painting. Now I'm going to finish up a little bit more of this and then come back later after the wing is done so you can see the final results. But again, we're just going to go in around the edges here and get the dark in there, being very careful not to go outside the lines. Now we're going to wipe a little of that brown off, get back and grab some gold, and go over top of that so we have a little lightness in the front. That's not enough. We can mix some white with that gold and make it a little lighter, like that. We can add a little of that over here. This paint dries fairly fast, so you don't have a whole lot of time to play. That's why I didn't go too far with the extender, because if I did, by the time I'd get to the end, if I'd covered the whole wing, the extender would be dry and it would not be doing what I'd want it to do. Again, we're just going to go into the edges all around the wing with the darker brown. And because the extender is on there, it lightens the brown up. You really don't want to, although this is a water-based paint, you really don't want to use water to lighten your paint up, because then you'll face the problem of possibly bleeding into the next area, and that's definitely not what you want. So the extender is basically the base of the paint before the color's put into it, and that's why the colors are not running into the fabric. So I'm going to continue on with this wing, and I'll come back and show you what it's like when it's done.
So here's a portion of the wing done, all 3 levels of feathers, and you can see where the base coat or the extender has been put on the bottom and middle row, because it's slightly tinted. Here's our wing totally finished. And here's the eagle leg. Here's the other wing. We're moving right along now. I'm getting excited. Now we have the other leg and claw done, and we're ready to start with the olive branch. So we've mixed some colors of green to put on the branch. We've got that painted. Next up is the bottom feathers, the tail feathers. And that is a combination of white and a little silver. I've got to turn the work around now so that we can get to the head without rusting in wet paint. So I've coated the head with white with a little pearlized white mixed in. And we're ready to start on the beak. and that will finish up the eagle. And you can see a close-up of the wing, how it's looking. It's getting fairly dry already, which is the nice thing about this paint. It won't be totally dry for a while yet. So we're going to start with the beak. We're going to shadow around the edges of the beak with a darker paint. And you can see that I'm actually able to rest in that wing without picking up any wet paint. So that's why I like working around the eagle the way I have, so that by the time I get to certain areas, the rest of it is dried enough that I can work comfortably with it. Again, if we had watered this paint down instead of using the extender, what I'm doing right now would have caused that paint to just seep down into the background, and we certainly wouldn't want that to happen. We're going to pick up a little bit of gold now to start filling in the center, give it a little bit of an actual beak color instead of brown. So we're going to fill that in, brushing over top of the brown so that we're blending our paint. At least this portion of it you're able to see. My hand's not in the way. I managed to get the camera angle a little bit better for you. I apologize for earlier. I'm going to have to fire my cameraman. Unfortunately, that would be me. We still need to add a little bit of shading around the edges of this beak to help to make it dimensional and more realistic. So we're going to add a little bit more brown around the edges until we're happy with it. So we have a little bit more shadowing going on. So there's the hand in the way again. Really try to keep it out of the way for you. Now you want to get close to the edge, but you don't want to get so close that you take the chance of painting the background. Because this is concave, it's trapuntoed, when you're looking at it straight on, you aren't going to see that detail that you're seeing up close like this. So it's going to be fine. Sometimes when you try too hard to be exactly perfect, you end up messing things up. So now we're working on the eye. That was a little too dark, so we're going to try to lighten that up a little bit. Basically, I'm just using the brown paint again with the gold. I was going to make him a green-eyed wanderer, but I don't think eagles really have green eyes. So at this point, I think we're done with our eagle. The paint that I have used in this project is by Jacquard. The first one is a neopague, which is just an opaque paint. The other type of paint that I use is Luminaire, also by Jacquard. This paint works wonders on black fabrics, as it only takes one coat. The nice thing about the paint is it stays relatively soft. It doesn't get very stiff from the paint. The important part was our extender, again by Jacquard. Now this has to be heat set. Usually it's done by ironing on the back, but in this case the iron will hover over the front. Stay tuned for Coloring Your Quilts Part 3. There's some new ideas for you besides painting, so I hope you enjoy it.